Hoy hoy, I am Tyrell McLaughlin at TNFF Tyrell, and guys, this is a SFB edition of the fantasy football program at True North here. But we are as proud as ever to be part of the Fantasy Points Media Group. Thank you to Monkey Knife Fight as well. But my biggest thanks today goes to the great Scott Fish because I got into the Scott Fish Bowl. And with that, I was thinking maybe I would get Froggy on the mic today, go through what the Scott Fish Bowl is, what it means to the well-represented True North Fantasy Football team to be so well represented because there's like a dozen of us from our motley crew headed to this beast. And I'd love to tell folks about Scott Fish, about Fantasy Cares, Toys for Tots. I'd love to also shine the light on some of the other people who make this shindig run and just get into why we love the Scott Fish Bowl, from the community aspect to the team building and the abstract scoring settings that are put in place by the wonderful Scott Fish. But most important, I think, is to talk about the ripple effects and some of the wide-reaching effect or impact that the Scott Fish Bowl has had on the fantasy football industry. And I don't think it is, quite full yet. I think it's like 90% full, this Scott Fish Bowl tournament. So make sure you still apply for next year. But when we highlight some of the branches off the Scott Fish Bowl tree here, you will get a good idea of how you can be a part of the Scott Fish Bowl, even if you're not participating. And if you aren't, you definitely want to be, because being in the Scott Fish Bowl's orbit is just so intoxicating. And I'll lay out why I think that is in a second. But do make sure you go check out the links that I put in the description. There's lots of stuff there. I'm going to put a PayPal page in there that you can contribute directly to as well. It's the easiest way, I think, to donate to the Scott Fish Bowl. Also, I was thinking, I'm going to break this up, I think, probably after this shorter episode. I'm going to go through every single division, talk about the magnificent, crazy amount of analysts in the Scott Fish Bowl, the celebrities, because this is like a pros versus listener style format, lending to the camaraderie of the Scott Fish Bowl. And I will, of course, as I go, rattle off hundreds of hot takes regarding the divisions. Hopefully I don't make a million enemies, but I think it would be a riot to go through these divisions because the theme this year is bands. So I was thinking I could rank them on a scale of 1 to 10. And, I'm sure I'll be big fans of some of these bands. I'm sure I'll be branded as a hater on others. And because I am getting up there in age, I think I might get overly nostalgic is what I'm saying. Or, I might not know who these bands are. So heads up for a midlife crisis, a Father Time Never Loses Epiphany on air, because, I might have no idea who some of these bands are. But that is one of the funnest parts about this concept. One of the brilliant parts of the Scott Fish Bowl is that there are so many individual leagues or divisions, and Scott comes up with these really fun themes each year. And the theme in itself takes on a life of its own. And toys were the theme last year, which was fitting. And the year before was classic video games. And this year is bands. Actually, one thing before I dive in, I want to say some people do feel a little bit alienated by the Scott Fish Bowl. And, Twitter always has that 1% crowd. So when the Scott Fish Bowl kind of floods the last pocket of dead air, which is another reason we love the Scott Fish Bowl, because of the timing in which we get to draft. But before training camps are in full swing, it kind of really occupies this area of the fantasy football pocket of time here. But don't be jelly. Don't hate the Scott Fish Bowl because it's popular. Just start playing satellites for next year and go out and be even more active in the community, or be even more engaging. Because I hate to break it to you, we just turned it up to 11. The Scott Fish Bowl is here to stay. And I think the exponential growth, the popularity, the notoriety for the Scott Fish Bowl has been accomplished entirely on the back of pure kindness, which will always win out, right? Keep kindness at the forefront of your mind in everything you do. You never know the impact that your words might make, maybe even for years to come. So even though we face difficulties of today and tomorrow, we still all have a dream, which is paraphrasing a famous Martin Luther King quote. But it's amazing that it can also describe the mentality that Scott Fish has kind of put forth, and the impact he's had and this tournament has had on so many people's lives, from kids in need to creating this pay it forward mentality in a niche community on Twitter, and just inspiring so many others to emulate how he's gone about his business. So I'm just thrilled to be in the orbit, as I said, to be part of it again. And I'm going to try and be less along for the ride this year. So what is the Scott Fish Bowl? I mean, edition 11, it's the Larry Fitzgerald Scott Fish Bowl, the Mark Messier Scott Fish Bowl, the Edgar Martinez Seattle Scott Fish Bowl, the Carl Malone Scott Fish Bowl, the Spinal Tap Scott Fish Bowl, as the man himself put it in his email, the greatest notification anybody can receive, that Scott Fish Bowl email. Guess what? But what is the Scott Fish Bowl? Number one, it's pretty much the biggest fantasy football tournament ever created. There's celebrities, the biggest names in fantasy and fans alike, all competing against one another. It's a slow draft format, and because there's like an unfathomable amount of entries, it's best described as like a multi-league tournament with over 100 individual leagues, and then the highest scorers from those individual leagues end up in a separate tournament, so to speak, that becomes the Scott Fish Bowl playoffs, which is a fun wrinkle in itself because we do have some later bye weeks this season with the schedule going to 17 games and 18 weeks. You know, strength of schedule is always a muddy topic in itself, but late season strength of schedules for these formats can be important. And man, these kind of tournaments are what us fantasy degenerates just love. You get to implement so much game theory and just be contrarian if you want. Zig while there's zag, and you apply even, like, you'll see some people like there'll be some big GPP or best ball strategies, even some DFS Millie Maker vibes that bear out in some drafter strategies. And because you get just one entry, there really are no right answers. That proverb, there's more than one way to skin a cat, which, by the way, is a pretty gruesome expression, but it is a common phrase you hear to describe how to win a fantasy league. In a tournament like the Scott Fish Bowl, though, there is 0 ways or a million ways, whichever way you want to look at that. And all of that is actually before we introduce the other wrinkle that I hinted at that Scott Fish Bowl throws into the mix, and that is some wild scoring settings. So we end up like pushing up different positions, and different profiles of players move up and down. Like this year, for instance, we're going to be flexing kickers, if you like, and the draft also has a 3rd round reversal, and some of the scoring also, it'll pump up accuracy for the quarterbacks. Banger running backs have been adjusted for inflation through the years by the Scott Fish Bowl, so a lot of wonkiness. It's kind of like if word got out what went down at the Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, but then another group of people were down to go back. They were thrilled to go back, and though that group would like kind of know what they're getting into. So it's a wonky tournament, but it is so much fun. And beyond kind of changing some of your preconceived notions about players, it's fun because there's not a lot of data to go off, including ADP, which is kind of, you know, why people shouldn't whine. I think if your league is drafting a little bit slower than other divisions in the Scott Fish Bowl, you don't, you know, land a reservation at the nicest restaurant in the city and then, you know, cry because the service is slow, or get on your phone and hit Yelp up. So if you're in a division that's drafting a little bit slower, just check out some ADP from divisions that are ahead of you and enjoy the ride, right? But I think more importantly than any of the scoring settings, the format, even more important than the experience, is that this whole thing, let's call it the antithesis of the Fire Festival, the Scott Fish Bowl, is organized entirely for charity, for Fantasy Cares, for Toys for Tots. And, you know, I've mentioned the Scott Fish Bowl, or the Scott Fish Fellow, sorry, whose name is on the tournament. Well, who is he exactly? He's the gentleman whose brainchild this whole thing is, the humanitarian baron, we should call him. And the way it got named, actually, the whole influence of the name, and that's a fun story in itself that I've heard before. But if you don't know who Scott Fish is, you've been living under a rock at ScottFish24, and you've been missing out on Fantasy Football Weekly, inarguably an elite fantasy football podcast, OG in so many ways, hosted by an OG too, Paul Charchian, another king of kings in the industry and society. Scott Fish, though, is just an incredible fantasy mind, always an analytical approach before it was even cool. But Scott is definitely more known for his philanthropy, which makes sense. I mean, this guy's won awards like being named Person of the Year in 2018 by The Athletic. He recently won the Matthew Berry Game Changer Award. He also won a Humanitarian of the Year award, but I cannot remember who gave him that one. I think it was the universe, obviously. But in keeping with the Scott Fish Bowl, the popularity, Scott himself, like what I respect the most about him is the way he's paved his path. Mr. Fish has risen to the level he has thanks to a, you know, elite work ethic, a good sense of humor, but it's also the way he's gone about it that I think is so commendable. I've said this in the past that It's one thing to do it the way Stephen A. Smith has done it, and it's something totally different and magnetizing the way somebody like Scott Fish has done it. Analysts / teachers like Ryan McDowell would be another great example, who is a BFF of the SFB. And there's countless others who are trying to replicate and putting aside, imitation being the best form of flattery. I feel like that is the core mission, or the whole point of the Scott Fish Bowl, is to implant the zombie chip in our brains to give back however we see fit, however we can. And I just laugh when you see Stephen A. Smith, because someone retweeted, come across your timeline, followed by a great guy like Scott Fish, because man alive, they're just on opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of how to be successful, but also how to become successful. Like, we should all strive to be at the top of our field or whatever, but it just get there via overwhelming good deeds and zero agenda driven kindness and positivity. Somebody like Sam Wallace from Rotoviz comes to mind, or T Seal, the pilot of the mothership at True North Fantasy Football. I guess what I'm trying to break down is the trickle down effect. I think that's the coolest thing about the Scott Fish Bowl, the amazing trickle down effect. And it's not supernatural. Like, what I'm saying is the Scott Fish Bowl, it exudes or instills or enforces, or at least encourages overwhelmingly elite behavior in the industry. And fancy this, guys, people want to gravitate to the good. It's just unfortunate that the good isn't always the densest material in the Twitterverse, but we do get to see it put on full display in what the Scott Fish Bowl represents, what it produces. This is the stuff that people want to identify with. It's the same reason we love folks like Rich Eisen, right? And the production, I think, just it shows up overwhelmingly in the numbers. Like I said off the top, the pay it forward mentality in the fantasy football community has been set in motion, like it plays in the Sean McVay offense, or Matt Canada. Go Steelers, go Canada, hashtag Big Ben's play action allergy is going to kill us. But for real, you just don't see a fantasy football league that's created on Twitter these days that doesn't donate a portion or all of the prize pool to charity. And that is 100% thanks to the Scott Fish Bowl. Even if some of those leagues seem a little pandering bearish to gain entry into the Scott Fish Bowl, perhaps, that is the unquantifiable contribution that Scott has made by proxy. That is the magnitude that's almost hard to comprehend. I think Scott is basically, he's like the Earth's atmosphere, and he's producing like the perfect conditions. So us sheets of ice are reflecting sunlight back instead of just absorbing it away. So I think Scott Fish, this tournament, just a game changer, and kind of a matchmaker too. Like the Scott Fish Bowl, the format of it, I mentioned there are celebrities. The majority of the biggest names in the fantasy football industry are in this tournament, and they're pitted against the fans and the listeners. So the Scott Fish Bowl really is just this concept where everybody's just hanging out with everybody, which is kind of the solution to all society's problems, right? And I know I'm just gushing here. Like, you might be saying, Ty, you are already in the Scott Fish Bowl. Pucker down, buddy. But it's really just how highly I think of the Scott Fish Bowl. And I was even thinking, like, sometimes people describe this as a pros versus Joes tournament, but these quote unquote pros, yeah, they could be massive names like a Ryan McDowell, but they can live in relative obscurity on an island that is the westernmost part of Canada, like me or Trav, or they can be a mom and pop shop. Not only does Scott give these kind of sites or podcasts exposure by getting them into the Scott Fish Bowl, but you also see him giving these podcasts entries to the Scott Fish Bowl to give away, which is just more community involvement around the horn. It's more trickle down effect, more interaction, and more traction for these up and comers. So just some wall breaking feedback of positivity loops we got going and connectivity. And you know what? Thinking about some of those giveaways, I think another inspirational observation is just the amazing displays of friendship, like people pumping each other up, trying to get one another into the Scott Fish Bowl. And that's exactly how I've gotten in, by the way, both years. So I just can't thank the True North Fantasy Football crew enough. They seriously give me a big head sometimes. That came out wrong. Unless I meant 007 cheat code style, but they are superhumans over there at the TNFF Network, and they really are why I get to participate in this GOAT fantasy tournament. And it's why I think the True North Fantasy Football crew is represented by 12 plus guys this year. And You see this everywhere. Everyone lifts everyone else up to try to get them in just so everyone can hang out with everyone. And I could really go on forever here, but there's something I really wanted to talk about. Really jumps off the Twitter page come Scott Fishbowl season. So once it's Scott Fishbowl time, once it's go time, once the super massive pool of players starts to be established, that's when we see a lot of the magic really start to be established. We see the charity kind of persist all year around, the awareness, but we see really the contributions start to pour in this time of the year. Check the links in the description, please and thank you. Give a little bit, whatever you can. Buy a t-shirt, play a celebrity eliminator. But beyond that, or connected to that, in the Scott Fishbowl, what I think it does is it sparks all this crazy ingenuity in the entire industry. Like, the Scott Fishbowl is almost this gym where everybody comes to work out their creativity and just flex their talents. And you see so much cool stuff every year. And some dudes, I'll admit, are super swole, as the kids say. I mean, like what Salito does, for example, with the Scott Fishbowl Potathon every year, it's just kind of unparalleled. And I mentioned the celebrity eliminators. Those are just a blast. And one of, if not the best ways to give back. And old Bal Will Harris at It's Harris Time, who was just crushing it over at Viridian Global. He kind of encapsulates the entire Scott Fishbowl because of the creativity just being off the charts. And then obviously the charitable aspect of the proceeds going entirely to the Scott Fishbowl. So get your Scott Fishbowl t-shirts. They are fantastic. And guys, they double as band tees this year too. And all of this is really just a small part of what the Scott Fishbowl brings out of the community, because it extends to spreadsheets, all the nerd stuff. Thank you, Addison Hayes. I bought a spreadsheet of his off of him on Twitter. And by the way, all of this work that I'm talking about is in the description below, whether it's Fantasy Cares, the PayPal pages, the Potathon Twitter pages, all that. Check it out. Immerse yourself in this great info and all the great people who are doing great work, and follow the great people because they're also great fantasy minds, which I really can't stress enough with a lot of these people. And if you're wondering, the Potathon starts the morning of the Scott Fishbowl, which I wanted to say is kind of warrior mode this year for the guys and gals south of the border, because the Scott Fishbowl commences this year on July 5th. The morning after July 4th. And I loved the Potathon's account on Twitter saying something about having your aspirin ready. So Salito and the champs over there start like as the clock starts on the Scott Fishbowl, which I think is 6 a.m. July 5th. And before I go, maybe speaking of partying it up, I'm in the Madonna division this year. I am definitely going to break this up. I'll go through like the full bans and bounties on the next episode here. It should be available in the feed tomorrow, I would imagine, but I'm not sure I belong in the Madonna division just because I was in the Scott Fishbowl last year. I think you could argue that like the Madonna division could be comprised of first timers like Scott Fishbowlers, touched for the very first time by Scott. But yeah, last year I was in the Polly Pocket division. So as you can see, a little bit of a Yankee swap Christmas office thing going on here when it comes to my Scott Fishbowl divisions, but still beyond fun to be a part of this. Last year, I actually had Josh Hermsmeyer in my division, kind of a hero of mine who was over at 538. Linda at Lindellians on Twitter, a very active, awesome contributor when it comes to the Scott Fishbowl, doing some really good work on kickers and what kickers mean in the Scott Fishbowl this year. Check her page out at Lindellians. Paulie from Paulie Sleepers was in my division last year, and so was Jules at the point after, TNFF alum. My highlights from last year, I did score a lot of points. Unfortunately, I finished higher in points scored than I did in the standings. Big miss, I stacked Cam with Julian Edelman. That was not so hot. I did have Mahomes and Tyreek. I also hit on Dobbins and Antonio Gibson. But I don't want to get into too much here, because what we're going to do at the True North Fantasy Football Network is on Friday, we're going to be putting on a big Scott Fishbowl live stream. There's going to be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of us, maybe more, who are going to get together. I'm talking at Coach Craig, at Dan Brown NFL, at Gold Jackets QB Jimbo, Jules at the point after, Nate at Nate_FFL. Lots more. I think we're going to have some special guests, including Viridian's at It's Harris Time, the man behind the brand. Get your t-shirts. And I think the man behind Goat District, Mr. JD, is going to make a cameo. I know he's super busy that night, but he is just such a Scott Fishbowl vet. And he's played so many fantasy eliminators that I'd love to hear his take on the Scott Fishbowl 11. And by the way, none of those guests will outdo the much awaited return of our Lord and Sealer at TCL 14. Call him Shady because he's back. He's back on Friday. And my whole point there is that, you know, we did something similar last year. You can go back and check that out because other than kickers, the third round reversal, that stuff is still evergreen. All the settings from Scott Fishbowl 10. I warn you, recycle the Stephen A. Smith bit. My apologies. But tune in Friday because that is when, you know, the content will ooze when it comes to the Scott Fishbowl. Divisions and everything should be pretty much filled by then as well. And I think it's just going to be an all-around blast to get together with that many guys. So this won't be the last you hear of me. Until then, I'm Ty at TNFF Tyrell. Thanks to the TNFF crew, and check out their postings and avies when it comes to the majority of the crew being in the Scott Fishbowl at True North FFB. Follow the podcast at TNFF Pod. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, by the way, for the YouTube channel. I know I don't say that a lot, but we really appreciate it. Sign up for fantasypoints.com. You'd be crazy not to. The promo code is 21TrueNorth10. I cannot thank the Fantasy Points Media Group enough. I can't recommend fantasypoints.com enough. And you talk about a well-represented crew in the Scott Fishbowl. The fantasypoints.com team reps some of the biggest names in this tournament. And of course, thank you, tournament. Thank you, Scott Fish at ScottFish24 at Fantasy Cares, fantasycares.net. Check out all the links in the description. Thank you, Scott Fishbowl. And make sure you go through all those links below. Give what you can. Learn about the Scott Fishbowl, the Podathon, hashtag SFB in all your tweets, hashtag Fantasy Cares. And until next time, I'm Ty, and I appreciate it. Don't work too hard. And I got to filibuster until I end this. I'm just the worst.